For those of you who do not know me, I am deaf. So I have my speech to text going. I've got my backup plan. I've got Prax, whom I can hear, who will fill me in if I miss something too bad, but either chat or, you know, just make sure we're not talking on top of each other so I can follow you along or follow along you, either way. So this class is which stitch when it comes to mutilation. And somebody is giving feedback. Okay, got it. Fabulous. So let's try my PowerPoint for fun. See if I can do this right. Haha. Which stitch? Or how to read a needle lace pattern and which stitches should I use? I'm going to mainly focus on reticella and punto in aria because that's what I mainly do. I have a background in cut work, drawn work, some bobbin lace, but for this case, it's reticella and needle lace, you know, the basic needle lace, reticella, punto in aria. So how do we get from a pattern to reality? So here's your basic pattern. It's a ficelio. It's one of my all-time favorites. And this is it, my recreation. Basically, you're going to start with your bread and butter bars. But these are seen everywhere. Figure 8, which you would take pieces, you would remove your threads and leave a window, or you would run threads into a cross-like pattern to build your foundation. And you would either do a figure 8 around them, wrap around, or do a buttonhole bar around them in order to give them strength, give them shape, and create other anchor points. These illustrations are from Grace Gamble, who was kind enough to let me borrow them. The other thing you're going to do a lot of is detached buttonhole triangles. It is suggested that you do these supportive stitches. You don't have to. I have found it helps it hold its shape. Depending on what you're going to do, if you're going to do a more organic shape versus a triangle, you're not going to have those supportives. You're just going to build. And you're going to learn more of these actual stitches later in the day in the actual needle lace class. So let's take a look at existing lace and see what we're looking at. So if you look here, we've got the detached buttonhole triangles. You see them here. There's a detached buttonhole fill here. We've got wrap bars. It's that figure 8. Buttonhole stitches around. Picots, which are fun little tabs that show up all over the place. And then these are just an overcast. So it's just wrapped around. Again, figure 8 bar, and you start learning how to see these when you're looking at actual needle lace, because sometimes the wrap bars and the buttonhole bars look very, very similar. And buttonhole bars can also be stacked on top of each other, so you can attach one to another, and you can do things like building ovals and filling in at the same time with that, which is kind of fun. Sometimes you'll see like a bobbin lace where they will do an entire braid and then lay it down and then build off that, which is lots of fun. But now let's get to the meat. So this is a pattern, and again, this is a pattern by Grace Gamble, and I've put her email here. She's an incredible website, which is a great source for reticella, punto in aria. And she's got several patterns based on actual lace. This is the actual lace piece up here. And so you can see this pattern is this motif right here. And I took this motif and created a purse. So I just used that motif over and over again. This is a close-up of the extent, so we can really look at it. So you've got the detached buttonhole triangles. That's a wrapped bar. Definitely see that. That's a buttonhole stitch here. Those are picots. This is a figure 8, or the woven bar here. My recreation, my interpretation, since I twisted the pattern so it's not completely square, my window changed. So I did the woven bar, and the reason why I like the woven bar, especially as your main foundation, is it's easiest to put other threads through and anchor them. And they disappear because it's woven. You just dive your thread straight through the middle and keep moving. Buttonhole stitch bars are also really easy to anchor to and have it disappear. And it'll keep the thread exactly where it needs to be. Whereas just a simple wrapped, it can get a little more titchy, a little harder to secure a thread. You can't put your thread through it. It doesn't give you much to work with, but it's great for just those little extra supporting and to prevent the lace from collapsing on itself. Questions thus far? I know I already went really, really fast. So when you're looking at these patterns, often there's absolutely no instruction. And like we just learned in the last class, people use those patterns for lots of different styles. They will take it and do it in needle lace, or they will do it in bobbin lace, or they'll do it in laces or in filet or whatever. And there's really not a lot of instruction. The creators of the patterns just kind of expect the person who's working it to more or less fake it. They're going to do what you like to do. There is no hard and fast rule on what stitches you put where, which is part of why this class is so hard to teach, because there really is no hard and fast rule. You can pick and choose depending on what you're going to do. If you want a more delicate lace, you're going to do more overcast, more wrapped bars because they're thinner. If you want a more chunky lace, you're going to do more of the woven. If you want it to prevent it from collapsing in on itself or really be robust and really hold its shape, buttonhole stitches are fabulous for that. I mean, a true buttonhole stitch, when you do it around those bars, you almost don't need starch at all for it to hold its shape because it's under that tension, and it's fabulous for that. The little hints we get on these patterns are things like, okay, we can tell that's probably some kind of detached buttonhole stitch fill-in. Okay. The darkened in triangles, probably detached triangles. We can make that work. But these threads, these lines are exactly the same thickness. Sometimes in them, you can see them a little thicker and you can go, okay, maybe a woven bar or a buttonhole bar would be better there because I want it a little thicker, but maybe not. And again, a lot of this is up to you. To do a double check, I'm not missing everything. So looking at the towel, how I made my choices. And again, this may work for you, this may not, but these are the things I thought about while I was working on this project. Forgive the quality of the pictures because they were taken in process. So here's the pattern. Great. So I've laid my linen on top of my card, my pattern, and this part's going to be the reticella because it's coming out of the linen. The part above will be all punto and aria because it's completely created out of the air, just out of the thread. So I'm using two different types of lace on this project. So I've already done an overcast on my edge because I want to prevent it from completely unraveling out to the hem. And you can see all my little anchor points on my pattern that I'm going to run my thread under in order to create this piece. I've removed all my threads except for 2 threads in my window. And then I'm starting another square, and you can see where I've pulled the threads back and I've trimmed them because they kept getting in the way, as they like to do. It's that same motif we just saw, that first square, and I've already started. And since I wanted this to be pretty delicate and it was in the linen, I didn't have to worry so much about it being robust. So I didn't feel the need to do a figure 8 or a buttonhole stitch along my main window, my main foundations, which is going to be your cross. That's always going to be your main foundation in reticello when you're doing the geometric. Thank you. The geometric styles. So the best way to work these, and once I was taught this method, it made so much more sense than doing one line, finishing off my piece and starting a new thread and starting somewhere else, was by figuring out an order of operations. So I would start, and you can see here, I started, and I believe it started right here. And so I stitched this way, stopped, did my buttonhole stitch here to knock out that one piece, because otherwise I couldn't get to that element, continued on to the middle, did the same on my outer sides, and then I'm starting my cross pieces. This is buttonhole stitch bars here, buttonhole stitch bars here, and you can see I'm starting my overcast, heading back towards the middle. And if you start working towards the middle, then you can do the outer rings and then move on to your next piece. But when you come out and do your radials, you'll catch these little corner motifs, and then you'll continue working your way out. You can also see just the edges of a buttonhole bar that I've done on this next motif because it's a hard motif to catch. Now we have more done. So starting for you guys to start practicing your eye, you can start seeing what you see and what was used. So this motif is special because the radiating bar, you notice, comes out but doesn't actually connect to the corner, which is a real royal pain in the butt. It's one I hated this motif for that matter because it just didn't go all the way out. And so I found it was easier to lay in these corners first and then bring it out and just tie it off to this one and then work from there. So the easiest one to spot would be, anybody want to take a guess what this is? Participation is a bonus. Anyone?
Detached buttonhole stitch.
Right. Anyone know this edge? Can anyone see? What stitch do we use on here? I have no idea what's beeping in the background. I don't hear it.
That looks just to be wrapped.
Right. That's your picot. I'm just identifying that because I didn't really dive into, and there are different styles of picots. Everyone kind of does what they like best. Lots of different choices, and you kind of get into a flow. And this one. Anyone know? So that's a detached buttonhole bar. Ooh. And so this one also has really cool motif in the center where you can easily take your threads and go do an over-under weaving on top of it all. So this actually doesn't attach to this loop. It's a free thread. So you can do a lot of cool stuff. And again, it's up to you. That's the fun of lace. It's so much a free form art. No one is going to stop you and say you're doing it wrong. So punto and aria, again, it's without the actual linen base. It's all just thread and your anchor points and your pattern. There are some who can do this freehand without anchor points, and they amaze me. And one day I would love to be that good. So this one, I did a lot more of the buttonhole stitch, like around the outer edge here, the top of this arch, because I wanted it to be able to really hold up not flop around and not collapse on itself. And again, that's why you do a choice like that. The detached triangles, which when you're doing it over a bar, it's a little more difficult, but it came out pretty good. More detached buttonholes and doing a basic fill and an edge. Wrap stitch here. Nice and easy. This detached triangle mimics some of the other ones you've seen, but it's a little different because it's not a free-floating triangle. It's actually starting from here and then attaching to this piece, and then you would stitch back and forth and fill it in. And that's how sometimes you'll see in the patterns, the triangles kind of come out of nowhere. And once you start spotting how to make diamonds, that would be how you do it. You just kind of make your triangle. You're just using different support systems within the stitch. I happened to come across this. It's a piece from a museum that I believe is based on this exact same pattern. And they've made several different choices than I did, which is why I'm trying to show there is no right or wrong way with lace. There's no right or wrong way to interpret the pattern. For this edge here, I just did a wrap stitch because I considered it the edge of my, it was the hem of my linen. They've interpreted it as that four-sided stitch. They made some of their loops a little bit bigger, but you can also see where some of their choices, or they weren't wrapped tighter or tight enough, or they've loosened up over time. They're starting to lose their shape just a little and starting to pool. The detached buttonhole triangles here, they've just made a bit more spaced out in their loops, which gives it a nice airy look. And it's a choice you can make. And then they did them tighter here, which gives it a more solid look. So there's lots of choices and patterns. And again, we saw a lot of them in the last class, which was wonderful. And you can kind of interpret them all differently. I picked a couple of my favorites. So like here, you could interpret that as a double bar where you would run one buttonhole bar and then attach a second one to it. You can do it as a woven, although on a curve, a woven is a little less likely to hold its shape. Inside the unicorn, that'll all be detached buttonhole fill. And how airy you make that would be your choice. Same with our Cupid. That would all be filled in with detached buttonhole stitching. You can interpret these as picots. You could interpret all this as just simply a buttonhole stitch, you know, around a bar. And it's all going to come down to, again, your choices. There's no right or wrong. Best thing you can do is kind of guess what would be what you're looking for out of your piece. So going back to these, so you've got your woven bars. It's nice, it's wide, it's, you know, it's great for straight stitching. You can't really get it to curve, but it's great when you're doing your foundation stitches. If it's a straight stitch, this is wonderful to use. You can get it nice and tight, it's strong, and it'll really hold its shape really well. And you can run other threads and anchor them through it without a problem. The wrap bars, it looks airier. They're lighter by nature. It's really hard when you're going to anchor a thread through it. You're going to actually just wrap your thread around and then continue it on to the next piece of the pattern. You cannot put your needle through it. You're going to have a greater chance of actually breaking your anchor threads. And then you've got the buttonhole bar, which is seen all over the place. And it really, you can do almost anything with a buttonhole bar. You can do curves, you can do straight lines. And again, this will add more robustness. It's not as thick as the woven bar, but it's not as thin as the wrap bar. And then you can also build off the bottom. You can run another line and just attach in between the loops here is where you would attach. Or you could bury your thread right into the middle. I know I'm speeding through and I'm using language that some folks aren't going to catch because you don't have those stitches yet. And like I said, it's a tough class to teach because so much of it is you're just kind of making your own choices, and it's okay to make a choice that someone else may not agree with. It's all going to depend on what look you're going for and what exactly you are trying to create. So we have quite a bit of time. I have quite a few pieces of lace, of my lace here. And let's discuss some, let's see if there's any questions, things you want me to try to clarify. And like I said, I know I kind of feel like I sped through. Yeah, I like using the towel is 102 thread because I like it nice and really, really fine. And then the purse was 92, which in truth, when I looked at the thread side by side, the 92 actually was thinner and didn't fuzz as much, which was nice. And yes, I prefer using linen. I have yet to find real proof of silk being used in any of this style lace. You will see it sometimes in bobbin lace, but not very often. Mostly linen was the go-to thread. We'll be going over that in the next class. Lots of cool linen resources because we're going to have the resource roundtable, and we're going to share where we buy our stuff. There's a couple of places I like going. There's the Provo Lace Shop on Etsy, and I use that. I always forget the other one, but I know it's in the handout for the next class. I use a lot of Etsy for my linen. It's the best place to find it. Don't go to Amazon. When I went to Amazon and ordered some 100% linen 92 thread, I got rayon. And they told me, it's close enough. No, it wasn't. So. Yes, I try to anchor it because you're either going to go straight through those threads to anchor that, because otherwise your threads will just kind of float and they will slide along your anchors, your main framework. So you want to anchor it somehow, whether that is driving your needle through your threads, your bars, or by wrapping around the bar so it doesn't slide. You really want to make sure you do that, which is why it's an important choice of whether or not you're going to do the woven or a buttonhole or the wrapped, is because you want to make sure you've got some way to connect those, especially when you're doing the rounds and the circles, your oval, anything else that's going to attach and radiate out. You want to make sure it's got spots along the way to connect, or otherwise it's not going to hold that beautiful shape. It's just going to collapse on itself. Yes, I prefer doing the white pattern with a black background because it's easier to see. Doing a black line is lovely. You know, doing it vice versa, where you've got a white background with the black pattern can work. And for some people it works great. For me, it gets a little confusing when you're laying down your white thread and then you've got this black and you're not quite sure. It just starts getting muddy. There are those who also, when they do a vinyl or some kind of covering over their pattern, because you want to do that, on your card, you're going to do something to prevent the thread from catching into your paper pattern and shredding it. Some people use vinyl. I've used packing tape with great success, especially if I'm only going to do that pattern once or twice. It'll hold up for me doing that for one project. There are others who do the period style, which is on fabric. You would draw your pattern on fabric and then stitch around it. Yes, the shine is the cover. That's that vinyl. There's also, is it architect overlay, which is usually a matte, and they come in different colors. So there are those who like it with a slightly green or slightly blue tinge over their pattern to make it easier to see where the pattern is. You could laminate. You totally could laminate. If I had a laminator, I would do it because it holds up well. I mean, yes, you're gonna stick holes in your pattern to make your anchor points. So you get your pattern, and I'm like, wait, I know I have. Like I have my linen box next to me. So, of course she's gonna do that. Joys of my background. There we go. So this is a basic pattern that I used with packing tape because I was only gonna use it once. Like, here we go. There we go. And now it's gonna disappear. Joy. So basic pattern with packing tape, and you're gonna shove tiny little holes, which you can't really see. Of course you can't. And you're gonna stitch anchor points with a different type of thread. I use cotton because I'm just gonna snip it away when it's all done. And you're running your threads underneath, and that's just to hold it in place as you're working. And so you want it to be a little robust. You want it to not completely shred. So a laminating would work. I use vinyl for patterns I'm going to use more than once. If I was going to do the period style, and I do have an example of a period setup. A dear friend sent me this. It's not my work. This is work by Master Sasha Tech in Callantyre, who unfortunately passed a few years back. But he was working on this beautiful piece. All right, forgive the mess. I'm gonna kill my screen background here so you guys can see that there is a mess behind me. So he's using fabric, and his anchor stitches are only going through the 2 layers of twill, and then this is all free floating, and then he's building the lace off of that. And that's the period method. Would have been couple layers of fabric and then either a paper pattern, or you would draw your pattern onto the fabric itself. Yeah, Sasha Tech is amazingly talented. And I'm very honored that they decided I should have some of his pieces. They mean a whole lot to me. I mean, he's got one finished piece for a cuff or a collar. This one's a collar. And then I've got part of a cuff, and then it looks like it's another cuff he's working on or was working on. But I have an example of the period method because I don't like doing the fabric. It's just me. I want something a little more rigid. There are those who will do it on a pin their pattern onto a pillow, like a bobbin lace pillow, and work on it that way. Again, it comes down to what you like to do. Any other questions? And by all means, just feel free to speak. I mean, I do have my speech to text if I can't hear you, so it's totally cool. But the silence is deafening. Yes, any questions?
When you talked about the different styles of stitching, I think it also has to do with the type of lace that you're making and what you're trying, like the end result that you're trying to get to. Like lift part is always stitched on a pillow because that's how you get the tension that you need
Right.
in order to do the styles. I do cut work just in hand, but then yeah, with the different patterns and things. So there's different ways to stitch. Also, not only personal preference, but also depending on the style of the lace that you're making as well.
Well, and it will also come down to, and one of the things you consider while you're doing this is what's it going to be used for. So like the towel can be much more delicate because really somebody's just going to use the ends and wipe their hands. It was made as an elevation towel. It's now been used in 6 elevations across the known world. That's my coolness. So they're not going to really handle the lace. My apron, which has several motifs across the bottom, is mostly wrapped and buttonhole stitch because it can get caught on anything. Since it can get caught so often, I want it a little stronger in case it gets snagged on something. It'll hold up better than just a couple of threads that have been wrapped real quick. So there's a couple of things you think about. If you're going to sleep on it, you're probably going to want a more robust choice in your bars just to hold it together, because last thing you want to do is roll over, snag it, and pop it. And that may also decide on how many threads you're going to go over. You're not going to do only 2 threads and then wrap it. You may do 3 or 4, and then just to give it a little more strength. Anything else?
Do you have any new projects planned?
I have several planned all at once because I'm awful. I have a silk veil. I'm currently doing just a simple edging on 2 sides and then a big thick lace bottom on. I've got the cowl I'm working on, which I'm like, I know I have here. So I pulled all this stuff aside. Aha, cowl. I have this cowl. So it needs still a band to go around the head, but this will sit on the back covering up my braided bun. And this was just an experiment to see what I could do and try a bunch of different styles. This has got a wider fill stitch. So it's that buttonhole, detached buttonhole stitch, but it's just a bit wider so I can get it a little more lacy and not as thick as the triangles. I'm like, in truth, I've also got it. Let's be bad. There it is. So there it is. So yeah, that's that detached buttonhole here. And then the middle is just basically bunches of, what did I do on that one? They're buttonhole stitch with little picots coming off. So when you're going to do a picot, and a lot of it's going to depend on what kind of picot you're going to do. There are some, like a bullion picot and such, that you can do without an anchor stitch. There are some who can do magic and don't need anchor stitches. I always anchor stitch my picots because I want something. And what you're going to do is you run, so you're doing your bar, and then what you would do is just kind of do a little loop underneath your anchor stitch that's going to create the tag, and then you're going to fill in that picot stitch, whether that's being woven or buttonhole stitching around it, which I do a lot because it's fast, it's easy. I am not a huge fan of picot stitches because sometimes they get a little, especially in the period patterns, they love their picot stitches. They're everywhere. And sometimes that makes a pattern look incredibly busy. And so sometimes I skip them. Like a lot of the ones that were on the original pattern for the towel, I just didn't do. But yeah, you're gonna run, so you run through your anchor stitch and then fill in your picot stitch, come back to your bar and continue your bar along. Like, is that Bronwyn of Hinescroft of Outlands? Is that my Bronwyn? I can't tell.
Yes, that is exactly me.
Oh my goodness. Yay! That totally makes my day.
Dude, I even told my husband, I am staying here for this. We are not going anywhere so I can see Magda's class.
I'm very lucky. So Bronwyn for years, because I started doing cut work. I did cut work and drawn thread from the age of 4. So I've got a large amount of embroidery background, and needle lace intimidated me to no end. It scared the heck out of me. And I don't know why, but for whatever reason, it intimidated me.
It's because
And
it's-
Bronwyn for years is like, you need to do this. You need to try this. This might be your wheelhouse. And I would always, nah, too scared, not gonna do it. I loved researching it and I was fascinated by it, but it scared me. And then I took Vidoma's class, and once I figured out the order of operations, it's like wildfire. I can't stop now.
That's the secret to needle lace, is the order of operations. It's not the stitching, it's not the patterns, it's not any of that. Once you understand how to plan your path and the order of operations, it's
Well,
easy.
and when you're looking modernly into needle lace, and again, a lot of the needle lace, like the Needle Lace Guild, is about 90% bobbin lace. There's a couple of folks who do needle lace, and really it only comes out at their convention. There's Amelia Ars, and there's quite a few books out on Amelia Ars, which is a Victorian it was a cottage, it kind of became a cottage industry. And you see that also with Ruskin, same style, different name. It was a cottage and industry in England in the Victorian era, where they started taking these patterns and this style and bringing it back. And they tried some new techniques, and there's some different ways of doing it. I'm a big fan of looking at different ways of doing it. Amelia Ars tends to do more of like a running stitch first, or their anchor points are not necessarily where I would put my anchor points, and you'll find your comfort zone. The more you work, the more comfortable you'll get. And I don't use nearly as many anchor points as I used to. And then I've lost his name. Prax will know, from the Elizabethan costuming page, who does the amazing lace and all the ruffs. Oh, Anchorette knows. Anchorette knows.
Matthew or Matt Gagne?
Yes. Oh my God. The fact he can freestyle it without a pattern is magic. It's witchcraft.
Matthew Nagy. And he also does the patterns too, but he has a great recent blog post on freestyling fabulous complex patterns, which is cool because freestyling is my jam, and I'm very excited to do more complex.
Yeah, no pattern. There is no pattern, no anchor points. You just create it. And that's my new intimidation level, that I'm like, one day I would like to.
No, it's not that scary. I'll teach you another class. We'll get you over that one as well.
But yeah, I get these brain blocks, and I know several of us as artists, we all do it. We psych ourselves out. We look at something and go, wow, that's so freaking amazing. I could never do that. Bronwyn, it was your unicorn, and I actually used that pattern in my slideshow. I saw this beautiful needle lace unicorn. I was like, I can't do that. And it took a long time to get over it. And now my new one is, okay, freestyling. I like my security blanket of my pattern. I'm real comfortable with that. But freestyle is faster. It's not nearly as stiff. And you can do some really complex stuff freestyle, which is cool. And I mean, you could do it with a pattern too. But I'm also like, I could say, my husband would be thrilled if I could stop stealing his packing tape to use for my lace. Or I have so many rolls of vinyl now in my closet, because they come in these giant rolls, even when you order a yard. And it's just taking up space. And I'm like, I'm done, and I know we've got like 15 minutes, so we can totally just geek out on lace for now. Yes.
When I saw the unicorn, when you posted it, I was like, yes, I did that. Oh, wow, I really need to do that again and see how I've improved.
Well, and I mean, again, I also had, I think a lot of folks have the same fear, and Vidoma's class really helped me with it. I never started with the thicker thread. I started with really thin thread right off the bat. It was that 102 that you did not like, if I remember correctly, Vidoma.
No, I prefer the 90/2 for the same reason you do. It's just it feels like it's a better thread, and it's actually smaller. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think that helped me because I could make my stitches really, really fine. And in truth, when you're working that fine, needle lace can be pretty darn forgiving. You can yank and twist and pull and kind of force, you bend the thread to your will. And I kind of enjoy that part.
So if you join the class later today, where we're going to start talking about the actual stitches, we're going to be talking in this style of thread.
Ooh.
It's monster, but you can see the stitches.
You will see the stitches, yeah. I almost did visual aids of the stitches, but then I was like, not really teaching how to do the stitches. I'm just choosing how to pick between them and give you at least a starting point when you're considering which stitch do I use. But anytime you'd like to stop the recording, Prax, we could totally do that, because now we're just kind of flapping our gums.